Hi. Welcome to Pillow Talk. This is the series where I don't do nearly as much research or preparation as I do for my multi-hour long-form video essays, and instead I sit and I yap to you about things that are on my mind and a little bit of philosophy. And today, what is on my mind is this album cover. Ooh, scandalous. Scandalous. The release of the cover art for tiny pop bombshell Sabrina Carpenter's upcoming album Man's Best Friend was truly the bombshell of the week for chronically online leftists who are running out of excuses not to do the dishes this week. It was quite the controversy, and I was super fascinated by it. She served up a meal that put everyone in a gosh darn frenzy. The sight of her on her hands and knees next to a man holding on to her hair in a not unleash-like manner. Well, it was blood in the water. And obviously, in an event like this, the thing that is on everyone's mind is, of course, what does that one video essayist turned wannabe B-team pop star have to say about this? And as a woman of the people, I came to deliver. Because here's the thing, I like this album cover, like, a lot. Like, I think it's stunning. I think it's captivating. And as a person who once wrote a song about being willing to light herself on fire for the vague attention of literally anyone, I get the vision. However, I am also, like, extremely aware of our society's current swing to the RIGHT, if you know what I mean. Our tendency towards conservatism as a society on the whole, right? Between the reversing of Roe v. Wade and just the general rise of the incels and their air quote male loneliness epidemic, trad wives, Southern belles, and the aesthetics of a more oppressive time in history have been rising in popularity recently. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot of conversations to be had. And we can't have all of them. So I kind of want to zero in and focus on the concept in this idea of like objectification and self-objectification. Can you objectify yourself? And if so, like what impact does that have on the world around you, the women around you, feminism, things like that. So we're going to be wading in some treacherous waters. Okay. I'm going to need you to put on your nuance hats. Okay. Mine's in a box somewhere. It's too flippin' hot for me to put a hat on right now. It's 95 degrees in my apartment. Put on your nuance hats and remember that I am a supporter of women's rights and women's wrongs, if not mostly women's wrongs. I love women. I love women. I really love women, obviously. I love women a lot, and I do believe in sex positivity, and I believe in women getting shit done, okay? And to prove it, today's video is sponsored by Bellesa. Look at this. Look, it's giving Sailor Moon, and it matches my bedspread. It's giving Moon Prison Power! It's giving Sailor Moon. Bellesa, if you don't know, is a sexual wellness company that is run by women. I have always very much respected their stance as a business, as they are very committed to sort of empowering everyone to embrace and explore their sexuality, right? It's your body, you should know how it works, and you should know what feels good and what doesn't. And Bellesa is a company that is safely providing ways to do that, right? And one of those ways being that we are literally sending out vibrators or gift cards to everyone who signs up to my giveaway. Ooh! You probably already know this if you follow my like community posts, but they sent me some samples, which is super fun. If you don't know where to start with toys, don't worry. They have many an option. There is the Pebble, which is this one. Look, it comes in this cute little case. It's right in your hand. It has suction and vibrations that are controlled independently without any annoying pattern modes. Air Vibe over here. This one is the Air Vibe. Dual stimulation, giving silent but deadly. They are both waterproof and rechargeable. And, you know, and it's a vibe. And there's so many others. So a big thank you to my friends at Bellesa for sponsoring this video, especially because it's almost definitely going to get demonetized, which is fine. And don't forget, we are sending out free vibrators or gift cards to everyone who signs up to my giveaway at the link in the description. So check them out. And without further ado... Part 1. The dollhouse of it all. Objectification. According to Oxford dictionaries, is the action of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. So someone being objectified is when they are being seen or treated as an object or a tool, rather than someone who is, you know, a person with thoughts and feelings and full agency. Who'd have thought? Oh my god, I just got the coolest text. Holy shit. Now, you don't, need to compare someone to a literal specific object in order to be objectifying them. However, that has certainly not stopped anyone from trying. It just so happens that when it comes to the objectification of women, at least, we do have one literal object that is extremely good at serving as both a metaphor for our objectification and also as a tool of said objectification. And that object is a doll. I'm not going to go too far back. It's just like when we did the what is art question. The further back you go, the harder it becomes to distinguish and define doll. But let's just say that little figurines, human-esque bipedal creature toys with movable limbs and removable clothing date back to at least 200 BC. Okay? And interestingly, they have always sort of kind of been toys, in one way or another. There were definitely lots of dolls that were used for rituals that were more important than just a random toy. But even those ritualistic dolls that had importance were often then given to children who historically would dress them up in the latest fashions of their time. The details will vary, obviously, depending on where in the world we are talking. There were definitely cultures that saw dolls and figures as extremely powerful and therefore dangerous for children to play with. But in general, there have always been some cultures and communities somewhere throughout history whose young children played with dolls and dressed them up. I think the dressing them up is important. Fast forward to printing press. As with most things in history, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Everything changed when Gutenberg invented the printing press, right? Sometimes I wonder if we did the wrong thing. The printing press, I would love to do a video on the consequences of just the invention of the printing press and the way that just rocked the world. I think that people underestimate just how fundamentally the concept and the existence of this printing press changed everything about the way that we exist as humans. It really is crazy. But it didn't actually really change the concept of dolls that much. It did inadvertently. The printing press is 1400s, right? I'll put the actual date on the screen here. But the printing press made printing in general easier. And then we have the Industrial Revolution. And in the, sort of mid-19th century, technology advances to the point where it makes printing things in general significantly cheaper and easier. Meaning that more books are being printed, more pamphlets are being printed and released to newspapers. The Newsies thrive, and then they thrive. They thrive. They shouldn't have had to thrive, but they thrived. Watch that movie, please. Watch it. You won't regret it. And if you do, then you're wrong. Sorry. What was I talking about? Yeah, so we get prints and things like that. And with this, not only do we get the rise of printed words, we also get paper dolls. If you see where I'm going with this. No, you don't. Paper dolls. Paper dolls are two-dimensional figures that are cut out of paper or cardstock, and they have clothes that are made of paper. They have little folding tabs that you use to put them on and off. I bought some Madeline paper dolls. I should get them. I don't want to get up right now, but maybe I'll get them later. Paper dolls could be printed in books. They could be printed in magazines and newspapers and just cut out by children, and then they could be entertained because there was no TikTok, there was no internet, there was no Sailor Moon. There was nothing for them to do. There was fuck all for kids to do. That's why they ran away from home, and then they started unions and they started tap dancing in the streets. Anyway, there was fuck to do, so they were playing with paper dolls. And the first American paper doll that was sort of commercially produced was based on J. Belcher's The History and Adventures of Little Henry in 1812. The characters were designed to act out various scenes in the story. There were also paper dolls that were not story specific, that just kind of just vibed, right? They just were hanging out. They were just regular dolls. This article on womenshistory.org says, as with most playthings, paper dolls encouraged girls in fantasy role play, but the roles were defined by the doll's clothing and accessories. And the thing about these dolls is that they served a specific purpose in a way. They came with certain specific outfits. The paper dolls from different decades send a very specific message about the role of women at the time in that society where the paper doll was produced. It's really interesting. You can kind of track a lot of how people felt about women and how people felt that womanhood should be taught by looking at these dolls. early paper dolls mostly just wearing pretty dresses, right? They don't do much. They have wedding dresses and they have Sunday bests and like cute little fashion dresses, outfits for whatever activity was really popular at the time. In the 1800s and turn of the century, society in general loved like a themed outfit. They loved like a specific bike wear, boating wear. They loved like a specific outfit for a specific activity. They really did. Athleisure was not to be found. They laugh in the face of your Lululemon, okay? But in the 20th century, like around sort of World War II, you start to see dolls that include like college student outfits, like backpacks and books. God forbid books. Dolls that are maybe working a little bit. A little bit. Emphasis on the a little bit, because career-oriented dolls, unless that career was movie star, continued to be outnumbered by dolls depicting ladies of leisure. And paper dolls were cool. Paper dolls were cool and they were successful until the Fire Nation attacked. Many people, I have learned, blame Barbie for the destruction of the paper doll industry, okay? Although it should be noted, I would say that the American Girl doll brand continued to release paper dolls with their dolls until like the early 2000s, which is kind of iconic. Barbie murdered the paper doll and people are mad about it. I will say, I was like paper dolls were huge, you know what I mean? Like I remember paper dolls in 1899. It was crazy. They were all the rage. It was Newsboy Strike and paper dolls. That was all anybody talked about ever. There was absolutely nothing else that was going on whatsoever. And then Barbie comes along and everybody was like, fuck your paper dolls. Fine, Susan. Anyway, side note, I highly recommend Babbity Kate's like deep dives on American Girl. Is this a weird angle? Side note, I highly recommend Babbity Kate's like deep dive on the American Girl dolls. If you love people deep diving into something for 5 hours, which I think you do, you'll love it. She's so passionate. It's so good. It's so good. I love her. I love her work. What was I talking about? Oh, Barbie, right. But there would be no Barbie without paper dolls, okay? Paper dolls as artifacts illustrate the social expectations for women at particular moments in time. As products of both popular culture and mass marketing, paper dolls are intentionally designed to reflect society's idealized version of womanhood. The dolls' little paper wardrobes communicate a wealth of information about the ideal woman of the past. And there is something feminist, I think, about girls being able to see themselves as doctors and astronauts and princesses and teachers. And there's something to be said about that being in paper doll or Barbie doll form, being able to change their clothes and explore different ways of living. There's so much that dolls can do in that sense. But the one thing that dolls can't do is kind of a big one. The things that dolls can't do for you is feel. They're toys. Dolls are toys. They're inanimate. And they can't help it. It's not their fault. But it's still true. I'm not here to be like, dolls are bad, actually. Burn the dolls. But, equal but opposite reactions. On the flip side, right, on the other side of that coin, as much independence and opportunity and freedom as these dolls represent, they also, by their very nature, put an emphasis on the role that a woman plays in society, what she does, what she contributes, as opposed to who she is and how she feels. I need to get more wine. In Flowers in the Attic, which you can listen to me talk about for 4 hours if you want. It's my favorite video. It's my favorite thing that I've made. The Flowers in the Attic video, I think, is my favorite thing that I've ever made. I'm just constantly trying to chase that feeling. I just want to read something like that again, but I know I never will. In Flowers in the Attic, the main character of Kathy Dollenganger, Kathy Dollenganger refers to her family, the Dollengangers. Hi. It's a stupid name, I know. You had to be there. Kathy refers to her family as the Dresden Dolls, and apparently so does other people, but people refer to them as the Dresden Dolls, and I had to look this up when I made that video. Dresden is a type of porcelain. They're porcelain dolls, basically, these like perfect porcelain dolls, but V.C. Andrews is a genius, and Dresden Dolls sounds better because alliteration. I heard somebody, side note, tangent, I heard somebody on a song, like a music songwriting podcast the other day, saying that they hated that Olivia Rodrigo used fame fucker instead of star fucker because they hate alliteration, and they were like an English major or something, and alliteration is apparently bad. Which, no, I highly disagree. Hardcore no. Angry emoji. Like, no, what? Alliteration's great. Alliteration is great. Everything about writing is great. Everything about writing has its purpose. There's absolutely a purpose for alliteration, especially in songwriting and music. And I love that she put fame fucker in there. I think that's a great line. Anyway, what was I fucking talking about? This is the problem with Pillow Talk, because I never know what I'm going on about. Let's see. Oh, they're the Dresden Dolls. The Dresden Dolls, right? So they are the Dresden Dolls. And they're called that because they are just these perfect little dolls living their perfect little life in their perfect little house. They're all blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They have, you know, an older boy, Kathy's the middle girl, and then two twin boy girls that are under them. They have this great house. They have this great life. Everything is beautiful and shiny and spectacular. That they're these perfect creatures, right? They represent everything that is good and beautiful and correct. And they fit so well into their roles in society, right? Chris is going to be a doctor and Kathy loves dance, and it's all very perfect, right? But even perfect is not immune to tragedy, right? Even the perfect, beautiful Dresden Dolls are not immune to tragedy and heartbreak. They are not, the family is rotten from the inside out because you know what? I'm not even going to say why. I'm not going to say it. We're going to go a whole video without mentioning it. That's what we're going to do. I have no idea what's wrong with the Dollengangers. I've never even read. Point is, V.C. Andrews is a genius. V.C. Andrews is such a genius. And so she's very aware of this comparison and this connection between dolls and perfection, and that it's kind of a pedestal that you can put characters on. It's a pedestal. Being a doll is an expectation as well as a role. And she's aware of that. And so she uses that deliberately to emphasize the fall, to emphasize the way that they crack and break. At the very beginning, she's letting you know that these characters are not free agents. They do not have full agency and autonomy despite what they think. They can't be anything they want. They can't get everything that they ever wanted. They can't be everything that they want. They don't have endless possibilities because, to a degree, things have already been decided because they have been made by someone else. To be a doll is to be a fantasy, is to be an illusion, right? And they built this whole life, and she uses this comparison of dolls, not to say that the life that they built wasn't real, because dolls are real. They do exist in our world. But to say that it was a fantasy, that it was an illusion, that it was fragile and breakable. Because dolls can be dressed up. They can be moved around and turned into anything that you want, but they can also be broken. They can be destroyed, and they can be abandoned. They can also come back swinging and pour hot wax over their dying, abusive grandmother's back and then flip her over and leave her like that in a Swan Lake costume, no less. Another piece of great literature that uses this doll comparison is Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House. A Doll's House centers around Nora, who forges her father's signature in order to secure a loan because this year. Oh, I am sweating so much that I have makeup all under my eyes. It's 95 degrees. It's so hot. It's a heat wave. This is a little bit of a ridiculous video to be making. Anyway, yeah, it's whatever year this play was written in, and women can't get, like, loans on their own. But her husband is apparently sick, and this is the, I think, 1800s, so it's like, if you can't give them penicillin, I don't know if penicillin's been invented. When was penicillin invented? Oh, 1928. Yeah, you can't give them penicillin then. Penicillin hasn't been invented yet, so the number one prescribed solution to all ailments is to go to the countryside, fresh air. And in order to do this for her fuck-ass husband, she has to secure a loan using her father's name because she doesn't want her fuck-ass husband to know that she has to get a loan to do this because his pride. And he apparently doesn't manage his own finances. And this would be fine, right? Like, this would be fine, except her father died like 2 days before she got this loan. I guess she didn't know. I don't remember all the details, but like her dad's dead on this day. And then the 2 days later, 3 days later, sometime later, he signs this supposed loan thing. So he finds out that he's bummed. This hurts his little stupid ego thing, I guess, if you can call it an ego. I hate her husband. Nora's husband's the worst. Wounds his little ego, right? And he comes to the realization that he does not, in fact, love her. And he cannot trust her, but also she can cannot leave because he has a little tiny sense of self, smallest man who ever lived. And so she has to stay so that the public think that they are a happy married couple, but they're over behind closed doors. But in public, they have to pretend to be perfect. Badass Nora eventually makes the decision that is infamous in the theater world to dip the fuck out, right? Nora's like, fuck off. Nora's over it. Nora's like, I'm out. You know what? You don't think I can teach our kids? You don't think I can raise our children? Fine, maybe you're right. Maybe I should go get myself an education. Maybe I'm gonna go learn some shit on my own so then I can teach my kids. I don't think she says it like that, but you get it. The door slam heard round the world. There's another famous woman who makes a similar-ish decision. I think Anna Karenina does something similar. I've never actually read Anna Karenina. I got halfway through Android Karenina. But I'm pretty sure Anna Karenina also leaves her kids, which is great. In theory, anyway, there is another famous poem that uses this woman as doll comparison, and it's such a big deal. The original Tumblr sad girl herself. Everyone, would you please welcome Miss Sylvia Plath to the channel? I cannot believe that she has yet to come up. Actually, that's a lie. I fully can. I haven't read The Bell Jar. Ooh, sorry. Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath was born on October 27th, 1932, and she died February 11th, 1963. And she wrote a whole bunch of dark, introspective poems that really ended up being sort of meditations on and explorations of femininity and depression and everything in between. The Bell Jar is sort of her most famous work, but I, again, haven't read that, and you're just gonna have to accept that. I stopped lying about having read books a while ago. So I did, however, read The Applicant, which is a poem that was written several months before her death in 1962, and just a few days before the infamous Daddy and Lady Lazarus were written, which I have also read. The Applicant tells the story of a matchmaker who is finding a wife for some guy, unfortunately, and the matchmaker sort of brings out this doll that is naked as paper and ready to be sort of molded and shaped into the potential husband's liking. Come here, sweetie, out of the closet. Well, what do you think of that? Naked as paper to start, but in 25 years she'll be silver, in 50 gold. A living doll everywhere you look. It can sew, it can cook, it can talk, talk, talk. And so there's like sort of a long-held precedent for this idea of the doll as a metaphor for the female experience, because the doll is separate from you. The doll represents you, but it is separate from you. It is other with a capital O. I made a video a few weeks ago about sort of free will and existentialism in Free Willy and other whale-related media. And I mentioned Simone de Beauvoir a little bit in that video, but the movies were mostly about like boys, so I mostly just talked about Simone de Beauvoir as like an existentialist in the grand scheme. But believe it or not, as you may not know, Simone de Beauvoir is like famously a feminist scholar. One of the most famous and most well-studied and like important sort of landmark texts of 20th century feminist discourse and literature is Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. It's like kind of iconic. It's a little weird that I didn't mention it the first time. So I'm going to right the wrongs of my past. We're going to talk a little bit about The Second Sex. We're going to talk a little bit about the Simone de Beauvoir of it all, a French existentialist philosopher who was born January 9th, 1908. She died April 14th, 1986. And in her 1949 infamous piece, The Second Sex, she writes about girls being given this doll, this passive object through which they can release feminine desires. They care for the doll, pamper it, dress it, inversely resulting in the girl starting to think of herself as the doll. In this Medium article by who? This Medium article by Paul.
What do you want, Paul?
Who doesn't have a last name, cites de Beauvoir as the doll teaches girls that they are objects of desires, that they should be pampered and be dependent on an owner. Identifying with the doll leads girls to believe that they only exist for the enjoyment of others, a notion that teaches girls to objectify themselves. Thus, de Beauvoir concludes it is through developmental differences that boys and girls are first separated, not physical differences. These developmental differences later give rise to the othering men perform on women, perpetuating the myth of the subordinate other. And so my point here, I think, God knows if I know, is that dolls, be they paper, porcelain, or plastic, have always had this sort of dark undertone to them because they exist in this in-between sort of nexus space between total freedom and like complete and utter submission, right? And I'm not talking about like consensual kink related submission. That's not the conversation we're having, but like a forced submission, right? The kind of submission that is generated and cultivated by patriarchy and that is governed by purity culture and sexual shame. A submission and an othering that some would have you believe is the natural order of things. And interestingly enough, there's something else that exists at this nexus point between liberation and domination, freedom and submission that goes hand in hand with this doll, which is sexuality, and not sexual orientation, not like who you're attracted to, but sensuality, like right, like sexualization, sex appeal, the concept of sexy, because sex, much like dolls, sells. Part 2, Gilded Cages, Roles to Play. My head's a little cut off here, but you're just gonna have to accept that. If you've seen me play live, you will know that I play a certain song, and I introduce that song as the pop national anthem, because that song is Hit Me Baby One More Time by none other than Britney Spears. And that is the pop national anthem. Britney Spears is the bedrock of modern pop music. Hit Me Baby One More Time, which is technically just called ... Baby One More Time. I call it Hit Me Baby One More Time. Move on. Hit Me Baby One More Time is a perfect song. It's so good. It hits every time. It's so fun and it's so good. And I don't think we would have any of the music that we have today if we didn't have Hit Me Baby One More Time. It was produced by Max Martin. It wasn't like solely written by Britney, but she was so instrumental. In her memoir, she writes about having like stayed up all night the night before recording it because she wanted to have like a raspy voice, because she wanted it to sound that way. She conceptualized like the entire video. She was so involved in creating the moment that was Hit Me Baby One More Time, and she played on this schoolgirl thing. She played on the fact that she's this young starlet and this young kind of sex symbol, and she knew how she was seen and she played into that, but she also knew what people her age wanted to see. She wanted a video of young people having fun after school and this fantasy of what it would be like to just be cool and fun, and she was able to bring all of that together and do this incredible thing. And I love Britney Spears. If you can't tell, I feel very strongly about Britney Spears in general. I am very upset that they're making a biopic. I think we should leave her alone. She's given the world enough. I do not want to see another hashing out and retelling of her darkest we saw her darkest moments in reality. We don't need a dramatization of it. So, John M. Chu, I have an idea for you. If you need the check, I'll tell you how to make that movie. I've said it on my TikTok, but anyway, Britney Spears, Princess of Pop. I'm telling you this because I always want to start with how involved Britney was in her career through all of it, by the way. Through Blackout, through this conservatorship, she worked. Like, she was working. Nobody under conservatorships ever has a job, because if you can work, you probably don't need to be under a conservatorship. Spoiler alert. She worked. She was always extremely involved in the creation of the product that was Britney Spears, and she was very aware of what was going on, and she's brilliant. So much of that success was, yes, a team creating, behind her, supporting her, and people telling her things, but she was so instrumental to that, and I don't think she gets the credit for that she deserves. But she also was very young when she started, and she was very aware of how people perceived her. Baby One More Time is all controversial because she's in a schoolgirl uniform and dancing all sexy, right? And then there's all this to do about when she turns 18 because she's famous before she's 18, and it's all gross, right? The public really had no problem being disgusting to Britney. She really took it on the chin, and she really said, okay, fine. And one of the things that was a big topic of conversation surrounding Britney by creepy people was her virginity. People were obsessed with her virginity, obsessed with it. Interviewers, media people would just flat out ask her on public like in panels in front of crowded rooms if she was still a virgin. Crazy. And she really was very good at handling those scenarios. I think she was well media trained when she was young and able to kind of navigate those. And she had everybody very much believing that she was a virgin, and this like Southern girl, this like, you know, Christian Southern girl who just like was very pure. And that was kind of part of the appeal. She's singing about like Baby One More Time is like pretty aggressive. Like it's pretty sexual. And at the same time, all of these conversations are being had about her virginity. And Simone de Beauvoir writes that about this concept as well, this obsession with the virginity, as virgin land has always fascinated explorers. Alpinists kill themselves every year attempting to assault an untouched mountain or even trying to open up a new trail, and the curious risk of their lives to descend underground to the bottom of unproved caves. An object that men have already mastered has become a tool. Cut off from its natural bonds, it loses its deepest attributes. There is more promise in the wild water of torrents than in the public fountains. A virgin body has the freshness of secret springs, the morning bloom of a closed corolla, the orient of the pearl the sun has never yet caressed. We know that there's this emphasis and this sort of prize, like prestige, put on the idea of virginity, which is made up, by the way. We made it up. It's not real. We made it up. The concept of virginity. It has no meaning and no bearing whatsoever on literally anything. You can break your hymen doing gymnastics or horseback riding. Virginity is not real. We made it up as a tool to help enforce this possession of women, right? Because men can't handle their own jealousy and their own concerns about women having been with other men. They want women that have never been with any other man. And so this idea of virginity really helps create a value system. But we know this, like, right? Like we've seen this throughout history, the idea that a woman is sort of sullied and dirtied once she is no longer a virgin. And it's a double standard, right? It's a double standard that does not apply to men, which is another problem that has been recognized by women throughout history. Women's rights activists were, writing and discussing this in private long before any large strides were made towards sexual liberation. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, an American writer and activist who was born in 1815 and died in 1902, wrote in a private journal that she began at the age of 65 about sexual repression. She wrote, "The first great work to be accomplished for women is to revolutionize the dogma that sex is a crime." But that's hard to do. It's hard to do in a world that is dominated by men. Simone de Beauvoir recognizes this, right? Beauvoir writes, "Social customs are far from granting her sexual possibilities on par with those of a single male. In particular, the unwed mother is an object of scandal, as motherhood is more or less forbidden to her. How could the Cinderella myth not retain its validity? Everything still encourages the girl to expect fortune and happiness from a Prince Charming, instead of attempting the difficult and uncertain conquest alone." Lord George Gordon Byron, the sixth Baron, resident degenerate gambler with an eating disorder and a hey mama's attitude from the 19th century, was a poet who slept his way through all of England onto Greece and got away with it. In fact, it made him more famous. However, the men that he slept with, who's the wiser? No one knows. The women that he slept with were not afforded the same respect. The women that he slept with simply could not and did not get away with the same kind of behavior, right? We're jumping around in in timelines here, obviously, but I want to say that this restriction on women's sort of sexual behavior has always been a thing, and it became a big part of the feminist movements, right? The waves of feminism in the 20th century had a lot to do with this, and were often very much inspired by Beauvoir's work. In Sex and Power, the Sexual Basis of Radical Feminism, Alex Cates Shulman writes, "The feminist movement for reproductive freedom, the women's self-help movement from California, the broader women's health movement, all organized around the idea of reclaiming for ourselves control over our very bodies." But it's not that simple, right? It's not that simple as saying like, oh, I didn't realize that this is my body and I can do what I want with it, because there is such a power imbalance. And so therefore any relationship between two people of differing levels of power is going to be complicated in a lot of ways and is going to have the potential for abuse and exploitation. Beauvoir writes, everyone unanimously agrees that catching a husband or a protector in some cases is for her the most important of undertakings. In her eyes, man embodies the other as she does for the man, but for her, this other appears in the essential mode, and she grasps herself as the inessential opposite him. She will free herself from her parents' home, from her mother's hold. She will open up her future not by an active conquest, but by passively and docilely delivering herself into the hands of a new master. But it's difficult and it's complicated to understand your own bodily autonomy and freedom when in a necessary relationship with a man, especially when you're attracted to the man, right? Like, it's hard to be, I gotta say, like, it's, hard to be a straight woman, I guess, back in the day, because that's just an extremely complicated relationship, because there are things that you want out of it. There are things that you enjoy out of that relationship. And yet there is an extreme power imbalance when you're in a place like Nora in The Doll's House, who you can't get a loan without a man's signature, right? Where you can't have a credit card, you can't have a job, you can't support yourself, you can't, own property and do things. In Dialectics of Sex, another kind of seminal feminist literature piece from the 20th century, Shulamith Firestone writes, in their precarious political situation, women cannot afford the luxury of spontaneous love. In a male-run society that defines women as an inferior and parasitic social class, women who do not achieve male approval in some way, shape, or form are doomed, and it becomes easier for women to strive for the recognition and approval of one man rather than many. Piggybacking on that idea, Alex Shulman writes, to this end, women must subordinate their true feelings, cultivate sex appeal, aspire to meet beauty standards, inhibit sexual spontaneity, and even fake orgasms. Anything to catch a man. And I know what you're thinking, but Biz, you're thinking, this is not the 20th century. You're talking a lot about things that happened a while ago, and not a lot about the thing that you started this video off with or clickbaited in the thumbnail. You're not really talking about 2025. You're talking about, right, this isn't the 20th century. This isn't the 19th century. This is 2025, and we are not where we were 50 years ago. And you're correct. However, you are also probably new here, because I always do this. I always go back, because I think that we can learn a lot about where we are today by looking at where we came from, especially with social justice movements and things like feminism, because of the waves and the way that it ebbs and flows, because we are currently in a bit of a backswing. I made a TikTok about this in talking about the Sabrina Carpenter thing. And one of the things that I found really interesting about it, besides that, is this capital F feminism conversation, was how representative I felt like it was of this backswing towards conservatism and conservative values in the aesthetics, right? Because Sabrina Carpenter has had this very old Hollywood, Betty Boop, pinup girl, classic femininity thing going on. She's been really leaning into this aesthetic. And I do not believe that Sabrina Carpenter is like a trad wife. She's I think a liberal, feminist, wonderful, wonderful girl. And I don't think that she holds the values of people of that time. But I do think that it's interesting how willing to palette it we are, right? I think a lot of people who dress in like vintage styles will say vintage style, not vintage values. But there's something to be said, I think, about, the farther you lean into these aesthetics of this sort of Southern belle, this time period where women did have less rights, the more you're provoking and inspiring conversation about what it was like to be a woman at that time. And when you are as gorgeous and glamorous and fabulous as Sabrina Carpenter is, you're gonna have the question of are you sort of glamorizing this? I don't know where I was going with that. I don't think that that's really a question I have an answer to. The fact that we're even asking ourselves, is this capital F feminism about this cover in the first place, is indicative also of that backswing. The fact that it's on anybody's mind that this is capital B bad for women, actually, I think is indicative of how close to the surface these concerns are. And that's why it works, right? That's why it works. That's why it's been done. Right? It is controversial enough that everybody's gonna be mad. Everybody's mad about it. If you can handle everybody being mad for a couple weeks, it is going to inevitably just be good for your career. That piece that Alex Kate Shulman wrote, Sexual Basis of Radical Feminism, that piece was written in 1980. Shulman writes, "We are experiencing a strong move to the right. Sterilization abuse, hormone abuse are on the rise. The gap between average male and female income is larger than it was a decade ago. If abortions were outlawed again, if women were pushed back out of the workforce, if we returned to viewing sex as an exclusive private matter affecting each person in isolation, rather than a political matter affecting all of us, it could happen again." And it being a change in consciousness and a revoking of women's legal rights. And that was in 1980. So we go back and forth, right? We do this. I think people lose sight of that when you're seeing things happening in history, is that like we are part of history. History is happening now. This is not the way that things are going to be forever. But here we are. The trad wives are tradwiving. You're bringing back choice feminism. Choice feminism. Choice feminism has made a triumphant return, hasn't it? Choice feminism. Choice feminism, if you don't know, choice feminism is the idea that women have the right to choose to do whatever they want, and that any choice made by a woman is inherently feminist because it is made by a woman, right? Like, the phrase choice feminism was coined by Linda Hirschman in 2006 to name the widespread belief in the U.S. that the women's movement has liberated women to make whatever choices they want. Specifically, these are choices in relation to wage and work and unpaid labor. Essentially, this is to justify and to defend women's choice to not work, to stay home and be a homemaker, to raise the kids, to, maybe not fight for more money at their job or something like that, right? And then it has, as all things do, gotten wildly out of control, broadened and gone very much off the rails. The view today that all choices are feminist can be invoked to support decisions to wear lipstick and high heels, to participate in Girls Gone Wild, to sleep with men, to enjoy pornography, to not have children, to hire a maid, or to adopt a gendered division of labor. Choice, and that's from Choice Feminism and the Fear of Politics. And the thing about choice feminism, as Ferguson sees it, is that it is less of a sort of type of feminism and less of an ideology of its own, and more of an orientation towards feminist politics. It unites feminists on all sides of the political spectrum because it has three sort of key features. One being that it understands freedom as the capacity to make individual choices and oppression as the inability to choose. Two, freedom is an individual choice, and since the only criteria for evaluating women's freedom is that individual choice, we should not judge the content of women's choice. And three, freedom is supported by a specific political narrative, that the women's movement in the past has made it possible for women to make free choices in the present. The idea is that you can choose to be a trad wife, and that's feminist. That's what this is for. That's what choice feminism is for, okay? And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I do. I hate to break it to you, but not all choices are feminist. That's just true, right? Like, being a woman is not inherently radical. You know what I mean? Like, it just is not. And the truth of it is that choice feminism is extremely beneficial and extremely helpful to the group of people that has arguably been feminism's biggest hater, biggest opponent in the boxing ring of public opinion. And that's white cis women, okay? It's white women. It is other white women that love choice feminism that have always been the problem. Just because you think that you are choosing to degrade and objectify yourself does not mean that that's a feminist choice. It doesn't mean you can't do that. I'm not saying you can't do that, but you can't call it feminism to do so. Just because a woman chooses to engage in and enjoys the role that the patriarchy has assigned for her does not mean that the patriarchy did not assign that role in in the first place. And it does not mean that all other women also have the opportunity to deny or choose that role. That's the problem.
Hi, sorry to jump cut to daylight, but I'm editing this and I just don't think that I was being particularly clear about this next part. And I mean, it's pillow talk, so it's like by nature incoherent, but I do have a little bit of a line and I kind of want you to be able to understand. So to clarify, like I'm talking in this next section about like using the way that you're seen to your advantage, right? So there's like an argument regarding this album cover that is like, oh no, it's sexual empowerment, and then there's also this argument that's like, oh, it's, you know, it's taking advantage of it. It's, you know, if you know, everybody else is sexualizing her, like leaning into it to get your bag kind of thing. And so I sort of tried to talk about that a little bit, but I don't think I was very clear, and I don't really like the way that it sounds. So that's what we're talking about, kind of, is the conscious act of like either sexualizing yourself or playing into a sort of role that people think that you should be because you are a woman. That's right. And while I have you in this other section, I also don't think I made it very clear that like this is also we'll do that. Because I also think that there's like a privilege in that as well, being like a white woman, that you have freedom to sexualize yourself in a way that women of color just don't, right? Women of color historically have been way over sexualized way too young, and like if a black woman did this for her album cover, I don't know who would be in the comments like arguing in defense, call it like of it being satire, right? Like it would just be a totally different shitstorm, and that is like also not really being talked about in this grand scheme of things when people are like making really angry TikToks. So I just wanted to put that in there as well. And generally just apologize for like rambling a lot. But so yeah.
I couldn't find the original article, but this is quoted in 1980 by Alex Shulman, Jennifer Gardner, writing for the California Journal Tooth and Nail, a piece called False Consciousnesses, that our oppression is not in our heads. We will not become unoppressed by acting unoppressed. Try it if you have the economic independence to survive the consequences. The result will not be respect and support. Men will either not like you, you are a bitch, a castrator, a nag, a hag, a witch, or they will accuse you of not liking them. This sort of brings us back to the here and now, right? Because you guys are right. It's not 1970. It's not 1860. It's not 1949. It is 2025. We have not only ran through several waves of feminism and experienced a backswing of conservatism of our own, but we have also like murdered media literacy, right? Killed media literacy. Like we buried that shit in the backyard. We have stomped on its grave and we celebrate its demise every year. So everything is even more complicated. Part 3. I am the doll. The doll is me. So, to absolutely no one's surprise, this video is a little bit all over the place, and I'm not about to make it any better. That's a rhinestone. I said earlier that, like, Simone de Beauvoir is an existentialist philosopher, and we talked about existentialism in that Free Willy video about boys and their whales. This is important. I'm bringing it up now because it relates to choice feminism, because one of the things of existentialism is this idea of your facticity, which I think I pronounced fasticity, and none of you corrected me. Anyway, facticity, which are facts, duh, and your facticity, physical circumstances, are contrasted with transcendence. And that's your sort of conscious experience and your understanding of reality. And agency is the ability to choose and do things, right? Let's do trees, because philosophers fucking love trees, right? You are standing in front of a tree, you want to climb that tree, and you know you can climb that tree, and you have the agency to go and to climb the tree. If, however, you are chained to the ground by cement blocks, you can't climb the tree. you don't have agency, right? You cannot climb the tree. In theory, you could choose to climb the tree, but your facticity is preventing you from climbing the tree. Your physical, literal circumstances are stopping you from climbing the tree, right? That's the idea. Like, you can conceptualize and understand that you could climb the tree, and you have the option to climb the tree, and you are free to climb the tree if you can find a way out of these cement blocks, but the cement blocks are your facticities. So one of the things that's so sort of important and interesting about Simone de Beauvoir's existentialist work is that she is able to articulate a lot of the sort of facticities and the hindrances on women, right? She's able to come to this kind of conclusion that one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. You are taught to perform womanhood. In Sex and Gender in Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, Judith Butler writes, "The distinction between sex and gender has been crucial to the long-standing feminist effort to debunk the claim that anatomy is destiny. Sex is understood to be the invariant, anatomically distinct, and factic aspects of the female body, whereas gender is the cultural meaning and form that the body acquires, the variable modes of that body's acculturation. With the distinction intact, it is no longer possible to attribute the values or social functions of woman to biological necessity, and neither can we refer meaningfully to natural or unnatural gendered behavior. All gender is, by definition, unnatural." And understanding that these things are not natural, are not the natural order of things, understanding that this idea of women being subordinate and being parasitic or being naturally less than or being of service, right? This idea of like godly womanhood in Christian circles and this idea that it's just the way things are is sort of shattered for a lot of people by Simone de Beauvoir's work in a very concrete and like logical, philosophical way, right? She writes, "The body of woman is one of the essential elements of her situation in the world, but that body is not enough to define her as woman. There is no true living reality except as manifested by the conscious individual through activities and in the bosom of a society." There's a whole portion of this conversation that is, about gender identity and things like that. And that's a little bit off of what we're talking about. But I just kind of wanted to touch on the way that woman is a role that is assigned, right? And that can be performed, and it can be performed poorly. It can be performed incorrectly. And this fixation on the role of woman and what a woman does and needs to be is ever present, right? We just don't fixate on the role of the man in the world the way that we have historically fixated on the role of the woman and what is the purpose of the woman, the utility of the woman. In The Second Sex, Beauvoir cites the 1744 piece Controversy over the Woman's Soul. "Woman is created uniquely for man and will cease to be at the end of the world because she will cease to be useful for the object for which she had been created, from which follows necessarily that her soul is not immortal. And she will cease to be useful for the object for which she had been created." It comes back to that sort of like objectification, that turning someone or something into an object, in seeing a person as a thing, as something without thoughts and feelings and without agency. I think that a lot of the problem that people have with this album cover is not whether or not Sabrina Carpenter herself thinks that women do not have agency. That's clearly not true. I think nobody thinks that Sabrina Carpenter is a trad wife who thinks that women should be on their knees with their hair as a leash for all men, regardless of whether or not they would like to be in that position. I don't think anybody really thinks that. I think that what is shocking and jarring and what people are concerned about is that it's not just women who know that Sabrina Carpenter is not a trad wife who are looking at this, right? The concern is that with imagery like this, there are going to be people who see this and see a woman on all fours with her hair being used as a leash, right? Like they're going to see a woman being treated as like a dog. And you're reinforcing this sort of image of a woman as a pet, as subordinate, as the other as an object. And the reality is that, like, there's no reason she can't do that. Like, just because it does perpetuate this image doesn't, like, I made a 3-hour video about the responsibility of the artist to, you know, uphold certain ideas. Spoiler alert, the conclusion is no. Like, I don't think Sabrina Carpenter is under any obligation to anyone to make sure that her imagery does not accidentally perpetuate female stereotypes and does not accidentally lead to further objectification of women, right? I don't think she's under any responsibility to do that. But if she's going to, you know, there's going to be consequences. And I think that she's fully aware of that. And I think that her team is fully aware of that. And I think that, like I said, if you can handle a couple months of people making some comments online about it, if you can handle the minor backlash, it's going to be worth it, right? Right? It worked for every pop star before, right? Especially when you're someone who, like Sabrina, is sort of, she's not doing Girl Next Door the way that Britney was doing Girl Next Door, but like that's because the Girl Next Door today is very different from the Girl Next Door of, you know, 1997. But playing into this idea of sweet and sexy. But I think it's silly for people to act like there's nothing to be said or concerned about with imagery like this, you know. I think it's silly to think that it should be naturally understood that it's some kind of like ironic satire on the thing. I think it's silly to be going into these really hardcore defenses of like, it's like a kink thing. Which is like fine. Like that's a whole, that's just like a different conversation to be had. It's an album cover for a pop song for a Grammy winner. You know what I mean? Like this is not like it's not like it's an album cover. You know what I mean? It's so hot and I needed more wine. Where was I? Oh, we're bringing it back, circling back. Let's circle back to paper dolls. A year or two ago, I was in an acting class and I worked on a scene from a play called A View from the Bridge, and I was playing Catherine. And A View from the Bridge by, is it Arthur Miller? A View from the Bridge is by Arthur Miller and is set in 1950s Brooklyn and follows an Italian family. There is the patriarch Eddie, and his niece Catherine, who he is extremely controlling of, and he heavily shelters her. He does not want her to get a job. He does not want her to have friends. He doesn't want her doing anything but being his sort of sweet little girl. Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked, and their cousins immigrate from Italy, and Catherine strikes up a bit of a relationship with Rodolfo. Okay, and so it's about structures and gender roles and family. We're not gonna go into it, I promise. I mention this because a theme in this play, a sort of recurring element in this play, is the song Paper Doll by the Mills Brothers. This was a hit song that held the #1 spot on the Billboard charts for 12 weeks from November 1943 to January 1944. It was written in like 1915 by a man named Johnny S. Black, who wrote Dardanella, but it didn't get like published and made into a song until 1930. It was originally sold in the 1920s to a publisher. Johnny Black died in 1936 after a fight with a customer at his Ohio roadhouse. Bummer. But according to Wikipedia, Black was apparently inspired to write the song after he was jilted by a girlfriend. The author Jack London Reel wrote that Black was a pianist who augmented his income by boxing. His girlfriend ran off with another boxer, and he wrote this song, which began, "I'd like to buy a paper doll that I can call my own," and ended, "I'd rather have a paper doll to call my own than have a fickle-minded, real, live girl." This song was named one of the songs of the century and has been inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. It's been recorded by Bill Crosby, Perez Prado, Frank Sinatra, Pat Boone, British actors Don Estelle and Windsor Davies recorded a version of it in 1975, right? It appears in the British television series The Singing Detective. It is mentioned in Tennessee Williams' Streetcar Named Desire, and several lines are sung by a Frank Sinatra impersonator on Law & Order SVU, Season 19, Episode 22. It is also sung in the first act of Arthur Miller's A View from the Bridge by Rodolfo. And Rodolfo earns himself the nickname Paper Dolls because he sings it, because everyone thinks that's gay. Apparently, like, sometimes you can be so straight you're gay. Sometimes you heterosexual so hard, you become a homo, apparently. Much like that one guy who called Travis Kelce the F slur for being in the straightest relationship you could possibly be in. Don't start. Anyway, it's a popular song about wanting a woman who is entirely yours, who does whatever you want, who does not have agency and freedom and choice and thoughts or feelings. A woman who can never leave you because you own her and she's made of paper. Right? And it's sung by this character who ends up being Catherine's sort of ticket out of life as a doll, right? Sort of out of her experience being sort of trapped and controlled by Eddie. It's kind of her ticket to freedom, is this anthem by this man of here, and she asks him to sing it at one point. And like, look, I don't know, this is Pillow Talk. You guys know that Pillow Talk is for when I don't have like a fully formed opinion on something, right? I do think there's something to be said about women who understand when they are being treated as an object and when they are being seen as a doll and using that to their advantage, right? Kathy Starchild writes, for most of history, sex was, in fact, both our undoing and our only possible weapon of self-defense and self-assertion or aggression. But I think that understanding your existence and a role as a sex object and as sort of an object in the eyes of others, as a doll, has both its benefits and its drawbacks, right? It's frustrating to understand that that's how you're being seen because you're experiencing it, and you know, you're speaking to men who are saying things like females and complaining about girls ignoring them, and being able to just hear the distance that men put between themselves and the object of their affection, the distance that they create when objectifying women in this way, that lends itself so easily to disdain and ultimately often violence. You can feel it. Most women and people who are raised and socialized as women have had experiences and conversations with men where you can just feel it. The fact that they don't see you as a person. They see you as something else entirely, as a conquest, a tool, a toy. At best, a vexing puzzle begging to be solved, and at worst, a toy easily broken and replaced.
Hi, sorry to jump cut to daylight, but I'm editing this and I just don't think that I was being particularly clear about this next part. And I mean, it's Pillow Talk, so it's like by nature incoherent, but I do have a little bit of a line and I kind of want you to be able to understand. So to clarify, like I'm talking in this next section about like using the way that you're seen to your advantage, right? So there's like an argument regarding this album cover that is like, oh no, it's sexual empowerment, and then there's also this argument that's like, oh, it's, you know, it's taking advantage of it. It's, you know, if you know, everybody else is sexualizing her, like leaning into it to get your bag kind of thing. And so I sort of tried to talk about that a little bit, but I don't think I was very clear, and I don't really like the way that it sounds. So that's what we're talking about, kind of, is the conscious act of like either sexualizing yourself or playing into a sort of role that people think that you should be because you are a woman. That's right. And while I have you in this other section, I also don't think I made it very clear that like this is also we'll do that, because I also think that there's like a privilege in that as well, being like a white woman, that you have freedom to sexualize yourself in a way that women of color just don't, right? Women of color historically have been way over sexualized way too young, and like if a black woman did this for her album cover, I don't know who would be in the comments like arguing in defense, call it like of it being satire, right? Like it would just be a totally different shitstorm, and that is like also not really being talked about in this grand scheme of things when people are like making really angry TikToks. So I just wanted to put that in there as well, and generally just apologize for like rambling a lot. But so yeah.
But at the same time, because we are socialized and raised and taught how to be a woman and be taught womanhood with such an emphasis on utility and on the role that we play in society and on the type of object that we are, on what we do and who we serve and who we are, and on the role that we play, we have the ability to sort of consciously step into that role, right? It is possible to know that you're being seen that way and to use that for your advantage. And that's what many, many women had to do in order to survive for a very, very long time. But you lose pieces of yourself when you do that too, right? We don't get to have it all, even though that's what we're told we have to do, right? Even though Barbie gets to have it all, dolls get to have it all. We can try, but we can't ever actually succeed in having it all, right? And something always has to give. In Mad Girls Love Songs, two women poets, a professor and a graduate student, discuss Sylvia Plath's angst and the poetics of female adolescence. Ariel Greenberg and Becca Claver write of the applicant that just as the living doll in the applicant couldn't have just stayed in the closet, eventually women have to choose something. Because there is no good solution to the how can you be a mother and a wife and have a career and be an artist at the same time question, the most popular solution is to postpone the quandary. But then what? In the movie Life Size, I think it's 2006, in the early 2000s Disney Channel movie Life Size starring Lindsay Lohan and Tyra Banks, Lindsay Lohan accidentally brings to life a doll. And it's basically the Barbie movie, but more 2006. What's interesting is that in Barbie, the movie, the Greta Gerwig Barbie movie, Barbie decides to stay human, right? Barbie decides that she wants to live in the real world. They fix Barbie Land, but she's like, you know what? I want to go to the gynecologist. She likes humanity. She wants to stay human. In Life Size, Eve decides, after experiencing humanity and after being real, after having full human experiences, she decides she wants to be a doll again. She wants to go back. And she thinks that she can do better for little girls and teach them more about how I think she just says be a good role model. I think that's the extent. I don't think they ever specify I don't know what she's explicitly going to be teaching these girls, but she's just I could be a better role model because better role model, good role model is an abstract concept. And she abandons Lindsay Lohan. It's heartbreaking. It's so sad. It's really kind of fucking crazy and dark to watch now because she feels like she can do more good as a doll now that she knows about being human. And that's a choice, And is she wrong? I don't know. She comes to the conclusion that she can use her status as a doll and her existence as this abstract sort of thing, this object, to teach girls and other women that they can be more than dolls, right? She can use her status as a doll to teach others that they can be more than dolls. And, we can't give life to dolls in the real world, only in theory, right? Only in film. But we also can't turn real women into real dolls in the real world. You can't really turn real women into dolls because at the end of the day, they're always going to be needed to save the day, right? There's emotional and physical labor to be done. What's his face in A Doll's House does not expect Nora to leave. Even though he's you can't be trusted around our kids. She's leaving and he's wait, who's gonna watch the kids? You know what I mean? You can't leave. He doesn't expect her to go. That's what's so sort of radical about that, is that there's a responsibility on women's shoulders that forces them into this place between human and doll, right? You have to be everything. You have to be perfect. You have to be a mother and a career woman and a friend, and you have to be a homemaker, but also, you have to make enough money to go out and to do things, and you have to be a boss, but also be a good coworker, and you have to be all of these things. But you also have to be human. My camera died and I'm rambling and I didn't really write an ending, obviously. I'm just going to wrap it up. I think that there is a power to knowing that you are seen as an object and kind of using that to your advantage and finding a bit of a freedom in the idea that you know, you're a doll, because it's just dolls, right? It's paper dolls, paper houses. Paper can burn, but it can also fly. You know what I mean? And I think that realization that you are being seen as an object and a toy and a doll, and you're taking advantage of the fact that people see you as less than human and less than real. And I have such complicated feelings about this idea that I wrote a whole song about it. Plot twist, plot twist. This was all a ploy. I'm tricking you. No, it is kind of a coincidence. I wasn't working on a video for this, I promise. I wasn't like, I need to make another video to promote my song because the last one didn't do very well anyway. But it did just kind of just so happen that like I had written this song about like paper dolls and trying to find power and joy and freedom in the fact that you are seen as disposable and replaceable, but also put on a pedestal, right? Like trying to come to terms with that kind of complicated feeling of being like, I don't think you love me, but you really love who you think I am. And that's crazy, right? And trying to kind of find the power in that. And then all of these conversations were happening online about choice feminism and, you know, how we portray ourselves to other people. And it's not a perfect tie-in, but it was enough for me to say like, hey, let me see if there's something here to think about. And now we're here and it's over. Thank you for coming to my pillow talk. Where are my comments? Let's look at some comments. Comment shout out from last video goes to Maddie Summer 8539. I love your Lord Byron bit. Please never let it die. I couldn't even if I wanted to. He will not let me. That man will not let me rest. He will not let me rest. Somebody did ask for the song though. Somebody, I don't think it was on this video, I think it was on a short. Somebody commented about the jingle. They want the jingle back. Do you want the jingle back? Do you want the Lord Byron jingle back? Please, dear God, do not tell me that I need to put the Biz Gets to Talk About Lord Byron song out and that'll be it. That'll be the hit. Don't tell me that that's what you want to stream. No, do it. I'll do it. I think I want to make a Lord Byron concept album. But yeah, I am on all the other social media platforms. I have a Patreon. Again, thank you to Blessa for sponsoring this video. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I love you the way that Tyra Banks' character in Life Size loves Italian food. And thank you for coming to my pillow talk.